Hello everybody, today you join me in the new Kia Sportage, and the truth is, this is going to be one of the most important reviews I do all year. Whilst I enjoy a blast in a supercar as much as the next girl, the fact is, for the vast majority of people, those are not the cars that you really need to know about. Even for those who own one, they're rarely the car you actually use on a daily basis. But something like this, you will. And unless you've been living in a cardboard box for the past few years, you can't have failed to have noticed the rise of Kia. Because in the last 2 decades, they've gone from being a somewhat outside choice for the economy car buyer to a real serious mainstream option, in the eyes of many trumping the old favourites like Vauxhall and Ford. As it happens, in recent times, the Sportage has frequently graced the top selling cars list here in Great Britain. The model is a bestseller for Kia around the world, and in the UK, it is their top selling car. So getting this car right is absolutely key. To give you some idea of the numbers we're talking about here, Ferrari sells something like 10,000 cars a year globally, whereas in the before times, at its peak, the Sportage was shifting nearly 40,000 units in Britain alone. But this isn't to say that the Sportage has an easy time of things. In fact, it's the one Kia that I've driven in recent years, I think, that really did fail to impress me. The rest of the lineup I really quite enjoyed, and found a few cars in there I would definitely describe as a hidden gem. Stuff like the old and sadly now discontinued Optima, and fan favourites like the Stinger, which absolutely everyone who's driven has loved, yet very few have committed to buy. My good friend Stuart has just put his name down on one, and I'm really looking forward to him getting that because I know he's going to have a whale of a time. Enough of that though, and on to the Sportage. Such is the importance of this model, there is even a European specific version tuned to add tastes. The key difference is in sizing, where this has a slightly shorter wheelbase and packaging than the other version. However, even this model is still fractionally bigger than the outgoing car, so width, length, height and wheelbase have all gone up by a small amount, around 10 to 20 millimeters. That may not sound like an awful lot, but one of my criticisms of the previous car was that it felt just a little bit too small to justify the fact it is an SUV type thing. This doesn't suffer from that. The boot is excellent, the rear seats have plenty of space. I'm about 5'10" and I can seat myself behind myself comfortably, even in this car, which has a hybrid system in it and a sunroof, both things which can often compromise space. The new car also comes with an incredible selection of both engines and trims. You have no fewer than 5 different trim levels, giving you 18 separate versions of the car in total, and those include diesel, petrol, mild, full, and coming soon, plug-in hybrid models as well. The boffins at Kia definitely haven't had an easy time of it lately. That engine range covers power outputs from 113 horsepower in the entry-level diesel up to 261 horsepower for the plug-in hybrid. The car I'm currently driving is a top-spec GT Line S with the full hybrid system. Though this video is more first impressions than a full in-depth review, earlier on I took out one of the 3 trim cars, which is the mid-range option, just to see how it compared, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The trim lineup in the UK is as follows. The base car is what they call the 2 grade, that's followed by GT Line, then the 3, the 4, and this, the GT Line S. The way Kia do things, there isn't really much in the way of options. A basic Sportage will set you back around £26,000, going all the way up to about £45,000 for the absolute top of the line plug-in. The top trim levels also have all-wheel drive available as either an option or standard, depending on the engine you go for. Visually, this car's a pretty clean break with Kia's old styling language, and instead takes its cues from this new philosophy they have, first seen on the EV6. So it has a more coupe-like profile to it, and I've got to admit that is one of the things I don't actually like about the car, because at the rear it does look like, to give you that sporty roofline, you may have lost just a little bit of luggage capacity for those times when you've got to move the particularly large and awkward items. At the front, Kia have also reinterpreted their Tiger Tiger nose grille, and I've got to say, I don't like the new treatment. There's just far too much plain black plastic for my liking, and although at a quick glance it looks very upmarket and premium, when you get a bit closer to it, it just doesn't feel quite as quality to my eyes. The lower spec cars also feature quite a bit of exposed black plastic on the back and around the side of the car, the wheel arches and so on and so forth. The higher trim cars have that painted, and I gotta say, it does make quite a difference. You also have the now obligatory suite of driver safety and assistance hardware and software. The majority of the time it seems fairly unintrusive and pretty good as these things go. One nice little touch I did notice when I was driving the car earlier was it now has a warning to tell you, if you're in stationary traffic, that the car ahead is beginning to move off. Given the ridiculous amount of functionality in a car like this, features like that are very much appreciated, and I'm sure will go just a small way to helping keep road rage at bay. Other nice touches I've noticed are that in this car you get the same side cameras that you do in the EV6. Those are particularly helpful because side visibility isn't the greatest. Front visibility has also been compromised ever so slightly by the very sporty angle of the windscreen. However, this is still a very easy car to place. At only about 4.5 meters long, it's still pretty small as SUVs go. The interior, whilst visually fairly dramatic, is actually quite conservative in the way that it applies technology. You do have two large screens up front, but in terms of their operation, they're not really that different to Kias of old. On the wheel, you still have physical controls for just about everything, including the 7-speed twin-clutch gearbox. On automatic cars, you'll find a new rotary gear selector, and in manual-equipped cars, fairly traditional lever, which actually is quite nice to use. Clutch engagement isn't the easiest in the manual car, but it's still a pretty nice thing to drive. Other ideas taken from the EV6 include the fact you've now got USB ports in the side of the seats, and at the back, one very large hook on the headrest and another smaller coat hook on the back of the seat. Combine that with the very usable back seats and large boot, and this is a very practical car. Not only that, but as is typical for many Kias, it's also very well equipped for the money. Even the 3 model actually felt like a very upmarket car, having heated seats front and rear, plenty of leather, all of this nice trim. You've still got all the display, the stereo's okay. This one has an upgraded Harman Kardon system. It's unlikely to win any awards, but it passes the industry standard Wurzels test with relative ease. The oohs and ahs come through clearly. With the GT Line S, you also get even more leather, you get some nicer stitching, you get ventilation for the front seats too, all sorts of goodies. These are really very well featured vehicles. But I did say that the previous Sportage was one of the few Kias that left me a little bit cold. And there's a very good reason for that. You see, the majority of Kias that I've experienced have been very good drivers' cars. However, the previous Sportage GT Line S was set up just a little bit too stiffly, which meant that while it was fun in the bends, that's not really what you buy a car like this for. Happily, that seems to be something that they've solved, and if anything, I'm tempted to say that this model rides a little bit better than the one that I drove this morning. That also had something of a firmness about it, and so does this, but over the lumps and bumps there seems to be just a bit more suspension travel going on with this car. Perhaps that's as a result of the added weight brought to it by the hybrid system, perhaps not. What is also different is the steering. On the previous car, the GT Line S got a chassis setup bespoke to it, and I think they may have done the same thing here and forgotten to put it on our little press cheat sheet, because the steering is totally different. This morning's car had a general lightness about it, and while it was agile enough, surprisingly so in certain circumstances, it did lack that weighting that really characterised some of the previous cars. This is really nicely set up. What is interesting is that it only has 2 driving modes, whereas the other one had 3, that had Eco, Normal and Sport. This has Eco and Sport. I'm not sure what happened to Normal, but I'm very happy with the 2 remaining. Sport doesn't change an awful lot. The suspension setup is passive, it's the throttle and the steering which change. The gearbox programming is also slightly different, but in practice, Sport mode's not something you're probably going to need all that often. I recently drove a close competitor for this car, which is the DS7. And where that had some nice touches, the interior did certainly feel a little bit more special, and the ride was a little bit better composed, it cannot hold a candle to the way the Kia drives. This is genuinely a very, very nice car to pilot. expectations should be tempered. This is no 911, but in terms of what it is, i.e. a small Korean SUV, it actually does put a smile on your face. I genuinely look forward to spending some more time with this car, because even in the few hours that I've had it, I've noticed quite a few nice touches. For example, if you're bored of the radio and your Spotify playlists, the car will even play you a selection of soothing sounds, including a log cabin fire or waves crashing against the shore. The engine bay of the regular 1.6 petrol is also a piece of genius, because if you're the sort of person that wants to do a little bit of maintenance on your own car, you're perhaps a new driver and you're trying to do the right thing, keeping an eye on all your fluid levels and that sort of stuff, they've made everything really rather easy. To change an air filter takes about 20 seconds, and I'd wager even the most ham-fisted of numpties could achieve it fairly easily. The hybrid is sadly a little bit more complicated, but your basic things such as your dipstick and your washer fluid are still very clearly marked. And let's be honest here, we all know that one person that tried to put washer fluid in the brake reservoir, so stuff like that I really appreciate, even if it's not the sort of thing I'm actually going to need. In terms of which exact model to go for, you've probably already made your mind up. The one I would say to avoid is the diesel. I have nothing particularly against it, but at 113 horsepower, it's probably going to struggle just a little bit. The 148 horsepower of the next petrol is much more appropriate to this size of car, and at no point feels particularly underpowered. This 226 horsepower hybrid is actually pretty spry and would probably be my choice. In terms of trim, I'd always recommend the GT Line S if you can. Things like the big panoramic sunroof you'll really appreciate, especially if you have little people in the back. It does make it feel just that little bit airier and more open. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to try or even see a base level model today, but Kia expect the majority of people to buy either the GT Line or 3. Though stepping into the GT Line S certainly feels like an upgrade from the 3 itself still doesn't feel like a lesser car. And that, I hope, is all I need to say for now. With any luck, I'll be able to get one of these for a longer review later in the year, and I'll be able to see just what it's like to live with and give you other information like real-world MPG figures, so on and so forth. That's one of the few things I haven't been impressed with today. However, this type of driving is rarely a good way to get accurate fuel consumption figures. The 1.6 litre turbo petrol earlier gave me only 29 to the gallon while I was driving it about, but that was exclusively tooling up and down, doing drive-bys and all sorts of stuff that isn't really the ideal thing for testing accurate fuel economy. But styling aside, I have to say everything Kia have done with this new car I really do quite like, and so it is a very good car to buy, and I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that, like its predecessor, it will continue to occupy a spot on the Britain's best-selling car list, even more deserved than ever. A big thank you to Kia for inviting me out to their event. Thanks to you for watching. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you all for the next one. Bye-bye.